What is the future into which God is calling us? I want it to be a question that occupies a fair bit of space in your mind over the next months. The agenda item on next week's parish council meeting is post-pandemic planning plans. Note that it's not post-pandemic planning. We're not ready for that yet. Not as a church community, not as a world, not as individuals. The future is still too murky. The present in this dreadful third wave is too emotionally exhausting. And the pain of repeatedly disrupted plans in the recent past is still too fresh. But it is time, nonetheless, to turn towards the future, grounded in the assurance that God, who is our good shepherd, has been with us, is with us still, and will be with us always. The truth, though, is that it is hard to be satisfied with just that assurance. We want plans. Some of us maybe more than others. We want plans that we can trust we won't have to cancel at the last moment. We want schedules, we want dates, we want details, we want direction. But we know we aren't getting much of that anytime soon. So how then do we turn to the future if we can't have any idea of what it holds? How do we turn to the future without actually making plans? How do we turn to the future while also finding a way to embrace, or at the very least, not resist, not knowing what's coming? We start with what we do know. God is with us. And with what we can know, the desires, the needs, the hopes, the worries of our own hearts. And then we put those two knowings together and we listen for what God says to us. So I invite you to make yourself comfortable, to feel yourself firmly grounded and supported where you are, to breathe deeply and know yourself to be in the presence of the Spirit. And if you wish, to have paper and pencil to hand so that you can record your thoughts or feelings or insights as we spend some time in the company of our shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. You make me lie down in green pastures and lead me beside still waters. You revive my soul and guide me along right pathways for your name's sake. This psalm is a deep assurance of God's faithfulness and a reminder of the faith that is in us. Sometimes, though, it is hard to see the still waters while we are in the valley of the shadow of death. It can be hard to trust that both can exist at the same time. Hard to trust that we shall not be in want when there is so very much that we want. It's not hard to name things we want. The world we live in cultivates the experience of wanting, celebrates the experience of wanting, offering us quick fixes in order to get us back to wanting as fast as possible. But these are not the wants that satisfy our souls, not the wants that our shepherd satisfies for us, not the wants that point us towards God's future. But God has placed longings in your heart that will satisfy. Longings that God also desires for us. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. What do you want God to provide for you? What are you longing for as you contemplate the days and weeks and months and years ahead? For now, don't worry about whether it is the right thing to want. You can take that question up with God later. For now, just acknowledge it. Just name it. Perhaps you will find yourself surprised by what you want. Perhaps you don't have to give it any thought because you already know exactly what it is. Perhaps you are not at all used to being asked the question. For 3 minutes, allow yourself to begin to answer it. What do you want?
Going to be bad and needs to go away, and I don't want to be interrupted until this is over, sweetie. I really ask.
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. You make me lie down in green pastures and lead me beside still waters. You revive my soul and guide me along right pathways for your name's sake. Regardless of what we want, our psalm gives a partial answer to the question of what the shepherd provides for us. Green pastures to lie down in and still waters to refresh us. I know I am not alone in a need for refreshment after 13 months and counting of the pandemic. We are deeply weary, body, mind, and soul. This year has been hard work. Being human this year has been hard work. Being church this year has been hard work. And while we do not know the future, I am pretty confident that the year ahead is also going to be hard work. And for very many of us, we are going into it with depleted resources. What are the sources of joy and sustenance that enliven and empower you in your life? Have you been able to access those this past year? Or have they been difficult to find? What are the gifts that God has given you as the particular beloved child of God that you are? And do those still feel like gifts? Or have you had to rely on them so much they're feeling a little thin, a little worn down? What would refresh and revive your soul? The psalm invites us to proclaim in hope and in faith. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. You make me lie down in green pastures and lead me beside still waters. You revive my soul. For 3 minutes, contemplate. What needs to be revived in your soul so that you can be and do all that God has called you to be and do? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. You make me lie down in green pastures and lead me beside still waters. You revive my soul and guide me along right pathways for your name's sake. Finally, we get to some forward motion, the promise of some guidance, some direction, and not just any guidance, guidance along right pathways. I think that one of the experiences of this past year has been the incredible weight of having to make decisions most of us are not really qualified to make for ourselves, for our communities, for our families. We've all had to become sort of amateur public health advisors, called on to make a seemingly unending series of little tiny decisions with great, great consequences. We've had to attempt to balance concerns about physical well-being with concerns for psychological and emotional well-being, economic well-being, spiritual well-being, in ways that are just impossible to balance. The right pathway has often not been entirely clear. And even when it has been pretty clear, we know that right does not mean easy. The pathways that await us as we move, thanks be to God, out of this pandemic are not going to be without sorrows and challenges of their own. Some of us I know are simply holding on for dear life, just waiting to get back to the world we so desperately miss. But if we are honest and clear-eyed, we need to recognize that that world is gone. The church community that regathers in our building when we are finally free of all the pandemic restrictions will not be the same community that dispersed from it last March. The schools and workplaces we return to will not be quite the same. The shape of many of our relationships will not be quite the same. We are not the same people. It is not the same world. And some of these changes will be an immediate joy. Some of the changes will eventually become a joy. And some of them will be a lasting sorrow. And if we are going to be able to follow our shepherd along those right pathways, whatever they turn out to be, we need to acknowledge the fears and worries as well as the hopes we have about what might be waiting for us on the path ahead. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. You make me lie down in green pastures and lead me beside still waters. You revive my soul and guide me along right pathways for your name's sake. So for 3 minutes, contemplate. What do you fear awaits you on the path ahead? What do you hope awaits you on the path ahead? At the very beginning of this reflection, I proposed that there were 3 steps in turning towards an unknowable future. We start with what we do know, God is with us. And with what we can know, the desires and needs, worries and hopes of our own hearts. And then we put those 2 knowings together and listen for what God says to us. I hope you know that God is with you. I hope that you know or have begun to know what is in your own heart, which is another way of saying that you know what you need to talk to God about. Now you just have to make time to have the conversation and see what God has to say to you. And if we had a whole day to do this together, I'd send you off for an hour of prayer time to begin that conversation right now. But instead, it is going to be up to each of you to take this home, as it were, to create the space, to create the opportunities to have the conversations with God, knowing God is with you, knowing what you need to tell God about what is on your own heart, trusting that God wants to hear it and that God has something to say to you.